briefing for the district study and the cost of services. Yes, ma'am. Correct? Okay, let's take them separately because I don't want to confuse the issue, and I think we have the time. Because for this one in particular, and I do appreciate the aggressive timeline, Troy, and again, this is for briefing purposes only because we're putting out the RFP. There are a few things that I want to make clear as we move forward is, one, this is going to be one time, and they're basically going to do this. What I need, I think, and what the council would need and what I would prefer is in terms of when they're doing this study, what is the time frame they're looking for? Beginning when the arena is built to, and the convention center expansion is completed to, 2045. So I'd like that timeline of what we're asking them to cover in terms of cost of service, because we know prices will go up, and we know that we will have competition for the convention center and for people making the playoffs in Houston and Dallas. So I'd like to kind of get that, because there's playoffs conversation. You talked about the different scenarios. There's a playoff possibility for us in that, which means increased security, traffic problems. The other is if we do see another shutdown in terms of either a government shutdown because the government has to shut down and get their budget in order, or we see another pandemic where we have to stay home. Are we going to include that in kind of scenarios in terms of how that's going to impact the cost of services? I'm glad we are keeping in the local preference in Sabeda, but I do want to stress experience in this, because I think that is going to be key as you take these numbers to the full council, that they're going to want to know that whoever did this study had the experience of doing this before. So as we move forward, I think we want to look at that. And then I do want to stress again, when we come to the blackout dates, that we send out a reminder 2 days after this briefing when blackout potential dates start to our council colleagues, and that we continue that, that as we get closer to that date, February 1, we remind them again that the blackout start date begins February 2nd. Because I do not want to run into the issue of someone taking all that work and effort to apply and then getting disqualified because they contributed to a campaign. So I think it is a big ask. What we're looking for is something we haven't done before. I think when it comes to traffic and security, that is going to be key, because a security for a regular NBA game or a regular game versus a finals game or a final, an NCAA championship game is going to be different. It's going to look different. The traffic is going to look different. The services in terms of what we need in terms of walkability is going to look different. So we want to make sure that we take that into consideration. The trash pickup afterwards, solid waste, is going to look different after having X amount of people. So the one thing I do want to take into consideration is, of course, the scenario for the game as we look at that RFP and the experience have, and then the information they have regarding our New Year's Eve celebration downtown, our Dia de los Muertos. And what I'm assuming is that as we grow and this area grows, that we'll see more activation downtown for Fiesta. So we want to make sure that whoever is applying to the this RFP, local and maybe national, and global, because I know there's groups out there that are looking at what we're doing here, that they understand San Antonio and what we value and what the community gets out for and what people come to the city to celebrate for. So with that, I open it up for discussion to my committee members. Who would like to go? Councilman White?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. So what are some key deliverables that we think we're going to get from the group?
As I mentioned, it's going to be focused on 2 areas. From a cost of services to give us, like we talked about, kind of as we phase into the district, what the cost for each of those different components, what they will cost to deliver those services. And those deliverables, we should get based on what we anticipate happening over the sports entertainment district, how much will it cost as the base. We also want to be able to flex that in terms of, like we mentioned, depending on what's happening in the district in terms of an event at any one time, we'll be able to scale that based on if it's just something at the Alamo Dome or across all venues at the same time. So essentially, what is it going to cost to provide traffic management control, EMS, fire support, maintenance for the district once built out, and security on all those different scenarios. We're also going to be looking at specifically identifying the opportunities for new revenue generation and what those opportunities are, and based on those opportunities, how much can it generate in potential sales tax. I know certainly when I've attended other venues outside of the city of San Antonio, a lot of the experience happens before even walking into the facility through terms of concessions or pop-ups and things like that. So specifically identifying what those opportunities are and how much we can generate in additional sales tax in support of our general fund. Those would be the two primary
What are
areas.
some examples of what some of those opportunities would look like?
Based on some of the conversations we had, there may be additional concession opportunities outside. There may be the opportunity for pop-up markets, fiestas, marketing. And I don't have the in-depth knowledge, but that's what they're asking to do. But those are some of the type of things that, based on discussions with people, that are opportunities that are out there.
That presumably this group would look to other cities that have put districts together like this and seen what's worked there and what could work here.
Yes, sir. As part of the experience, we want to understand, their experience, background, and qualifications, where they have done studies like this before.
Yeah.
And we'll certainly take that into consideration as part of the evaluation.
Okay, well, listen, I'm glad we're doing this because the questions that I get all the time from people in the community are, again, how this is all going to work operationally, the public safety, right, of folks that are down there, that are enjoying whatever the events are going down there, how we're going to do that. And then along with how do we maximize what we are going to do in this district from a revenue perspective, right? Because there's what I told people, and I think what the city's position was at the end of last year was that this is not all going to be about people, that attend Spurs games, right? Or that go to the arena for whatever it is. How do we maximize this from a revenue perspective, bring more money into the city that we can then use for all the day-to-day, quality of life issues that the city has to address everywhere. And so to the extent that we can find a group that will identify these new revenue opportunities, I think that's something we should do. I'm glad we're doing it at the outset before this thing really gets moving. And so I'm supportive of this and appreciate the work on it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Metz-Gonzalez.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of questions. I was going to ask the same question Mark had. If you had an idea of, I think you said in here, identify new revenue opportunities. So if you had an idea of what that looked like, but you shared that a minute ago. And also on the evaluation committee members, it's definitely an all-star team of committee members, but mainly in the finance space. So I was wondering if you had thought about any public safety specialists that we could include, because that's one of the priorities that I think you're asking for.
We did not, you're exactly right. I mean, cost of services and revenue typically is going to be in the budget and finance space, and that's why we kind of stack the team that way. Certainly this consultant, when they're actually working to develop these cost of services and these revenues, they're going to reach out to fire and police and get their input. But we did not have anybody on the team specifically from those different parties.
Is there still an opportunity to include them?
Certainly, I mean, this is the reason why we are getting your input. So prior to that solicitation going out, if that's something the committee wants us to evaluate and put on, we can do that.
Okay. I would like that to be the case, but we can talk more about it.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it, sorry, yeah.
Okay. No, thank you. I think, in terms of, I know we have Maria on there, but I think Councilman Gonzalez brings up a good point in terms of maybe getting someone who has worked on coordinated something large scale, with getting on there in terms of, are they giving us the true cost of what it would cost to mobilize a unit, especially in a downtown that is going to be still under construction. I'm sure it's going to be perpetual under construction, and what it would take to kind of negotiate that. So I'm going to leave that to y'all, and then if you could get back with us on a memo about if you think this would work or how we would incorporate that kind of perspective. Because putting up the barriers and things like that, the cost of that, and then if we get into a situation where we're like, okay, we're going to have to close this street again, making sure that we've taken all that that we have a group, that we've choose a group that takes all that into consideration, I think would be helpful. I think in terms of revenue, I like, Troy brought up ads and pop-ups, and we've seen that with Final Four. The other thing, when we talk about parking, is I would really like this group to see if council needs to look at creating a special ordinance or permit, kind of like we do with garage sale permits. And Troy, I brought this up with you before, is when we have this big event, if people are going to be parking cars in their yards, that we have a permit, and they have an understanding of what our expectation is if they're going to be using their personal property to park vehicles in and charging $60 or $80. And that way we have an idea of how that's working. So parking is going to be key as we look at that, and that's what I'm really hoping that we understand how much that costs if we have to go through that process and put out an ordinance for parking permits and what that's going to cost too. That's where I'm leaning, is if we have a big event, people get a permit so that they can park, and that way we know that they're not, that they understand the safety conditions that we're going to need in order to, if something happens to that vehicle, PD, fire is going to need to be able to get in and to provide services. I think you kind of have the idea of where we're going for this pre-solicitation. I think the only thing is in terms of the cost of service for our security. And the other thing about security, as we talk about this, is I know if they could, this group, some of the groups that will be renting out the convention center, the arena, will have their own security and hire off-duty. So understanding that gets folded into kind of what our expectation is. Then they'll be hiring local, which will be SAPD or Bexar County, and how we do that. Ben, you'd like to share?
Good morning, Chair, committee members, and Troy may have already covered this, and I walked in a few minutes late, but just want to reiterate, one, appreciate the feedback. We'll go back and look at that, but I just want to make sure that we're clear on the evaluation committee is strictly there to select the consultant. Once they're selected, they will be engaged with police, fire, public works, because we're going to need all of that input and work with them so that we can create the kind of models that Troy talked about. So that I don't want to leave you with the impression that it's a kind of a finance budget kind of study and we're going to drive. It's really going to be a coordinated effort. We got to have their input in order to get to the right space and the right kind of modeling and assumptions that we're making in terms of, as Troy said, a scalable model that looks at what's happening in the district, how much activity is going on, and then we're scaling our services to that. And so that's our goal, but we will take the feedback, and then our goal again is to issue this Friday and want to get out the door pretty quick. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and we look forward to the follow-up, and it could be through a memo. Thank you.
No, Chair, the only other thing I was going to mention, you brought up parking, and when we were actually putting the scope together for this, we looked at parking, and we intentionally removed parking out of this. We're going to come back to you with another parking feasibility or parking study, because it's so complex to support that district, but not only the district, but the entire downtown footprint. And I think it may be better putting that into that scope of work and separating that out from this, if y'all are okay with that.
No, I am fine with that because I know that's going to be a bigger conversation that this committee and city council needs to handle. But I want to make sure when they talk about traffic patterns that they have a scenario of we could be looking at strictly garages or bringing people in when this group comes together to look at cost of services. Because that, again, and I think that's why when we talk about public safety and officers is traffic cops and who's paying for them and what sort of cost of service that is. So if we have, if we, and I just know a little enough about traffic to be trouble, but if we are, we were like, no, we are not going to let people park in this part of the area, so we do not have to worry about traffic flow coming this direction, understanding that what we're going to need there, if we're going to have the barricades and traffic cops are going to be located. And I'm thinking, again, in terms of traffic, think New Year's Eve, think the concert where we had Elton John and then everything going on, and what we had there. Think Garth Brooks back in the early 2010s, you know, and kind of that sort of problem coming up. So even if we're not talking about parking, let's talk about traffic and where these parking locations will feed into, the feeders. All right, so thank you on that. If there isn't anything else, we'll go on to the next item. I wanted to separate these because they're very different. So the next item for briefing only, we will move on to item 5. Madam Clerk, please read the caption.
Item 5 is a briefing on the release of a solicitation to provide the city with an executive program manager for the Sports and Entertainment District program in the estimated total value of $10 million for 2 years over 3 one-year options to renew.
And this is the second of the presentations related to the Sports Entertainment District. This is a pre-solicitation briefing for an executive program manager for the Sports Entertainment District. And you'll hear me refer to this as the EPM throughout the presentation. This is an important piece of the puzzle in putting and implementing the proposed district. The EPM will be part of a city-led program. They will be responsible for the overall oversight of the district program throughout the life of the program. As we mentioned, there's a lot of moving pieces to this construction program. It take a lot of coordination through the convention center, the arena, the venue with the Wood Courthouse, infrastructure that's going to be put in place to support the district, and also the operations and improvements going on at the Alamo Dome. This is a model that is fairly common across these large type of projects. It's also a model that we have in place and we're utilizing at the airport right now for the terminal development program, and also for the implementation of the associated CIP. It has proved very, very effective in managing risk. They are essentially going to be a representative of us as the owner of the convention center. This is going to be a phased project over time. The initial scope that they will be focused on is really kind of bringing all these pieces together. You've heard Ben talk a lot in our presentations about all the different components and all the different pieces to the entertainment district. They will actually come in through phase 1, help us kind of bring all those pieces together, develop a detailed project plan, evaluating risk, looking at strategy, putting governance in place. They'll also be looking for risk, in addition to risk, looking for opportunities. One of the things that we specifically want the EPM to look at is, for example, when we actually go through and we put in place the expansion for the convention center. Simultaneously, there may be an NBA arena going up down the street. There may be opportunities for us to leverage kind of both projects at the same time. For example, purchasing steel. We may coordinate packages because based on volume, we can purchase better discounts for steels for all the project versus creating competition for looking at the convention center package for steel versus the arena putting together a package for steel and all the mixed-use development. So we really want to see where there's places and opportunities that we can generate efficiencies and not generate competition between all the projects in terms of labor and materials. In short, this EPM would be brought on board as soon as possible and help us kind of bring all these pieces to puzzle together. We're proposing that this be issued through a request for qualifications. I mean, I think to your point, Chair, on the first one, we want someone with broad experience and who has done these projects before for different types of districts to actually minimize that risk and help us put this in place. Proposed term initially would be 2 years with 3 one-year options. I mentioned that this would be the first phase. The first phase basically is approximately going to be $10 million. As we work with them and we have all the pieces of the puzzle coming together, we would come back to council again with an expanded scope of work for the EPM and with additional costing throughout the duration of the program for the entertainment district. The funding sources, there's really 2 components. One is going to be the HOT redemption and capital fund, that we talked about before with the district study. That will be for the initial phases of providing for the costs for not only the EPM, but with our city team. As we actually have construction projects that have been approved, for example, like the convention center, then from an accounting standpoint, we can actually capitalize those costs, charge them to the construction project, and they would no longer be hitting that HOT redemption and capital fund. So it'll be the costs of putting those assets in place. This would also be a new contract. Similarly, when you talk about the evaluation voting members, given the importance of this contract and the duration of the contract, we have a pretty robust team, starting with Maria Villagomez, our Deputy City Manager, Ben Gorzel, myself, Alex Lopez, the Assistant City Manager, John Paterick, Assistant City Manager. Michael Shannon will be invaluable as part of this, as part of our Director for Capital Delivery Department. Art Reinhardt, who recently joined our team as a Public Works Director. Tim O'Cronley, who is our Deputy Director out at the airport, who has the experience of hiring an EPM already for the airport. Then Erica Ragsdale, who was working for Lori at the time and has some continuity and experience on the Sports and Entertainment District. So a pretty large team and robust team to make sure that we select the right firm to represent the city throughout the duration. As I mentioned, this is a request for qualifications, primarily all the points, 50 points on experience, background, and qualifications, to make sure that we have a firm that can actually accommodate this type of program. A proposed plan of 25 points, SBE prime contract of 10, local preference 10, veteran-owned small business 5 points. In addition to the local preference points, we also went through the Small Business Committee. Sabeta will be required for subcontracting at 14% of small business enterprises. And that will be addition to the 10 points on the prime for the evaluation. Again, fairly aggressive timeline and a similar timeline to the district study I just presented, with releasing again at the end of this week. Coming back with pre-submit on January 23rd. Responses will be due February 27th. Negotiate the contract, come back to this body on April 7th, and hopefully with City Council consideration on April 16th or thereabouts. And then working with the EPM throughout to put them to work on the Sports Entertainment District and the management of that district. Again, Chair, brief presentation, but that completes my presentation.
Thank you, Troy. Again, another aggressive timeline to make sure we get this done, but, and I wanted to separate it because I wanted it to be clear, and we know we have people watching in terms of the proposed term for this is 2 years with 3 one-year options. And so that's why I wanted to separate it, because I didn't want there to be any confusion, and wanted people to understand is this program manager would kind of take this role to facilitate what's going on downtown. And the other thing is, as we continue to talk and get ideas, is I like the one-year options if we need to kind of grow this into more of an area that doesn't just sit regard where the arena is. My one question, though, because as we look at slide number 4 with the evaluation criteria, and we've had this brought up, is what it looks like in terms of experience, background, and qualifications with the proposed plan. That's only a 75. And what I'd really like to see, while I am appreciative of local preference points, is I'd really like to see us try and get to an 80 in terms of background and qualifications and proposed plans. Add another 5 points possibly to proposed plans and leave 5 points for local preference, because I have seen a few too many come through audit where we have local preference points and then there's a big zero. And that's why if you could go back at it and you can respond with a memo and say, Councilwoman, I think there is going to be local that is going to need, that it is worth putting our local preference points, because that is within our means. But if we're, I don't want a big zero where local is concerned. I want to make sure that as we go through this process, that the max points we could get for qualifications and proposed plan is there, especially proposed plan. Because this is something new, it's something we haven't done, and what we're asking them to do is work with an existing Hemisphere program that we had. We have, Tower of America's in that area. We have a neighborhood association. Like, there's gonna be a lot of work to be done. So I wanna make sure that we have somebody that if we had taken out local preference and veteran-owned, and I hope there's a veteran-owned business out there that can get the points, that we get as close to a 90% as 100% points that we can. So that's my one kind of thing about the 10 points and the fact that I'm really glad experience, background, and qualifications is at 50 points, but I want to, in terms of proposed plan, I want to make sure we have the best plan possible, because I do not want to see some of the scenarios we've run into the past where we are where we're stuck because there was 5 points out there we would have given or something like that, but we kept them for the local preference program. I want those putting the RFQ together to really put forth something that's very competitive and kind of highlights all their expertise on this. But those are my thoughts right now. But if you're like, no, we've got plenty that have done this, plenty of local businesses that have done this in Chicago and LA and overseas, that's great. If not, we have to understand that Chicago, LA, these kind of program managers are coming in very similar to where the airport is, but we didn't do local preference for the airport. So those are my thoughts.
No, understood. And we'll work with the city attorney's office on the local preference to see what opportunities are out there.
Okay.
Currently, under the ordinance that governs the local preference programs, the points are really bifurcated into two pieces. 10 points for companies that are headquartered, and 5 points for those that have a substantial business presence here located in San Antonio. So we'll work with the attorney's office, see what opportunities are out there.
See what we have, because there's a big difference between headquartered and strong presence. So I look forward to hearing from my council colleagues. Councilman White.
Yes, thanks again for the presentation, Troy. I've mentioned this to Ben. I've talked about it with Eric. I met with one of these groups that is looking to get involved in this, I don't know, 8 months ago or so now. And I asked them specifically regarding pay, if we could tie their pay, at least in some respect, to performance. In other words, we're not just giving this group a lump sum payment for managing this project, but if the project gets done on time, on budget, et cetera, they can make more. If it doesn't, they can make less. And it was really interesting because the guy that I met with, when I asked a question like that, and he sort of smiled and said, well, yes, you guys could require that if you wanted. We've seen it done before. I don't know why we would not push for a pay structure like that. That said, I am not an expert in these in hiring these program managers. But what are your thoughts on on making sure that we structure the contract with whichever this group is and tie their pay to performance in some shape, form, or fashion.
I think it's certainly something that we can look at. I think there's different forms of incentives. There may be positive incentives, there may be disincentives, like penalties or things of that nature. So it may not be so much, we're going to pay you an additional amount if you meet certain milestones. It may be if you don't meet certain milestones, there can be other consequences out there. So I think it's worth something exploring, and we can come back and look at those opportunities and where it makes sense. Sometimes I think when you provide a contractor with an opportunity for additional money, when they come in, there may be padding in there, but that would be for us to evaluate to make sure that they're not padding their budgets to make sure they can meet them. But certainly worth exploring, I think.
No, I think we will definitely take that back. We hear you. I know this has come up before. You know, I think at the end of the day, right, we're talking about accountability and making sure that people are doing the work that they were supposed to be doing and delivering projects. I think where we've got to be thoughtful, Councilman, is that in this case, and Troy can jump in here as well, we're talking about the EPM, so kind of think about them as kind of the umbrella over the district, right? And then we're going to hire design teams, construction contractors that are going to go implement that. I think we have to be a little bit strategic and thoughtful about where we put those, how we do the accountability at those different levels. But I completely hear you. I mean, staying on schedule and on budget's important. We've talked about that on the airport, how, you know, a one-day delay is a lot of money if we can't make a decision and move forward. So all of those pieces are going to be important to include having the EPM help us set up a governance structure that we'll be working on internally to make sure that process moves. But completely hear your point, and we will take that back.
Who is going to be ultimately responsible? Is it the EPM? I mean, yes, we're going to hire folks, or the EPM's going to hire folks to do the specific jobs, right?
Right.
But who ultimately is responsible for getting this thing done on time and on budget?
So you're going to have different layers. So the EPM is to help us manage the district, right, and to manage those projects. We'll have a construction contractor, for example, potentially doing the convention center expansion. That contractor will be required to deliver that project, right? And it will have milestones and things that we're holding them accountable for.
But
So-
is the EPM a step above them?
The EPM is there providing more project oversight, program oversight. So yes, so they're looking at the whole district, not just the expansion.
And they're going to be the ones to help pick these contractors and schedule when they're out there and do their work?
We would be doing the procurement for the contractors, the design teams, for each of the projects. But again, that EPM is going to be there helping us with that program oversight of the district.
Yeah.
Assist us with, for the convention center expansion, for example, what type of delivery method are we going to use for identifying that from a construction standpoint? Helping us draft the design specs, the construction specs, and facilitating all that to make sure that we can actually solicit and get a competent contractor in there. At the highest level, they're going to make sure that from a risk perspective, that contractor is performing based on the timelines and the milestones that they should be. In the event they're not, they will elevate that through to the governance committee that it's not performing.
So they are going to be watching the construction schedules of those that are working on the project. And
Absolutely.
maybe also helping coordinate, well, if we're doing work here at the convention center and we're also doing work on the arena, you know, is it taking place simultaneously, and how's everybody getting around on there, all of that, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so, I mean, to me, if they are, it sounds like they are ultimately responsible for how this is gonna move and take place down there. And so to the extent there's, you know, delays is the easy one that comes to mind, over budget's the easy one, another easy one that comes to mind, but the overall well-being and nature of how this thing moves through the process, if they're the ones that are there to make this thing happen correctly, I think we need to put some metrics in this agreement with this group that they've got to live by. Otherwise, they don't you know, for lack of a better way of saying it, they're not going to make the money they want to make if this thing isn't going right. I mean, that sounds kind of elementary, but I know there's a couple different ways to structure these agreements, and I would like to see that in this agreement with whichever group this ends up being. Yeah, I mean, that really covers the rest of what I was going to say, but I'm interested in my colleagues' take on that. Okay. Thanks, Chair.
I'm just going to pop in real, because I hear what you're saying too, Councilman, and that's why I said in terms of the proposed plan, let's give them, if we can give them a few extra points, or if we can make sure that when we look at that 25, what our expectation is for the 25, and then if y'all could take into the understanding where this committee sits and the committee member White sits. My one caveat with this is in terms of the business background is if I'm putting out an RFQ and you're telling me this is motivated, if they come back and they're saying, yeah, we could do that, but we get to pick the contractors, that is where we might hit a speed bump, because this council has very specific parameters in terms of when we pick contractors for this project, what they're paying their laborers and things like that. So I think that's the one thing in having this briefing and when you have the sessions is they understand is what they put in the proposed plan and what you bring to the council, they're still going to want, as a council, we need to decide what oversight we still want regarding this project. Because I am not comfortable of giving up some of the oversight this committee and this council has and the city manager's office has so that the program manager can work a little faster. Now, if they can make some guarantees and they're watching this or they come back and see and they're like, oh, well, you know what we can do? We hear what the council's saying and we want to put in this. Let's look at it with what the caveats with their proposed plan is. So I hear you, but I really think it's up to those putting forward the RFQ to hear what you're saying and put some, to give themselves the edge on, in terms of points, what they can do and what they can deliver. Because they know, as most of the city knows, is that we want projects delivered on time. And if you put together a plan that tells us how you're going to do that, that's great. But if it means us having to give up some of our control, are we willing to do that? So that's the one thing as we move forward, and you have the pre-solicitation briefings communicating that and having those groups understand what the desire of the council is. Any other committee members? Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I just want a second or a third at this point, Mark's point. So interested in that fee structure and what that looks like for the EPM. Also on the estimated value, the first phase on slide 2, the first phase that's related to the proposed terms, or what is that first phase? How many phases are there?
Well, essentially in my mind, there's going to be 2 phases. The first one is just kind of getting the foundation put down as far as taking all the pieces and putting together a detailed project plan, looking at risk mitigation, looking at those opportunities, establishing governance, and a host of more things, alternate deliveries for the construction projects. As I mentioned, it's an approach similar to the airport. We start off about the same amount with the airport, and as we work with them and we put all these pieces, the foundational pieces together, the second phase, which would be actually the implementation phase of the district and managing the construction, we would come back to council with an amendment to the contract with associated costs and also probably putting in the safeguards as far as the incentives that we're talking about. But the first phase is really just getting the foundation laid and all the planning put in place for the subsequent phase, which is the implementation and construction.
So the 10 million only accounts for the first phase?
Yeah.
Okay.
10 million
And-
or less, I would hope.
Yeah. I noticed that the community engagement piece is missing for this EPM, but is there a separate contract for community engagement throughout this process?
There's not a separate contract that I'm aware of. I mean, we talked about this. I mean, if there's community engagement, you have all the different pieces, they would actually help manage that. That may be done through a separate contract or a consultant that comes in under the EPM. But all the different pieces to include community engagement, infrastructure, all the different pieces, they would manage those pieces and make sure that the timing is being implemented to actually deliver the program.
Yeah, I probably want to see that just spelled out a little bit more clearly,
Okay.
because that's the bulk of what residents, right, are looking for, asking about. So they might, any of us could probably get in the weeds with, infrastructure improvement ideas or timelines, but making sure that we are just communicating this to residents at all times, I think is important. So whether it's part of this contract or a separate one, just want to make sure that we have this at all times.
Got it.
So Councilman, we'll be having a B session tomorrow as well.
Yeah.
Talking about the district overall, so we can talk about that a little bit there as well. When we think about the EPM,
Yeah.
their job is really gonna be to oversee this program and
Right,
this
no.
district and sequence and do all of those things. One of the things that we'll also be looking and working with them on is, and I think there's a CCR making its way towards governance, but much like the airport, we'll work on setting up a dashboard,
Yeah,
external, so that people can track what's happening in the district, what activity's happening, what, how projects are advancing, how things are moving.
sure.
They will help us do that as
Sure.
well. And we want to have that integrated to some degree with our other systems so that, it is staying up to date without a
Okay.
big manual lift on our side. Because it's really not helpful if we're having to spend a lot of time manually turning stuff around. But in terms of keeping the community informed, that will be part of their work. If there's something more specific on the community engagement side, we can probably talk about that a little bit more during the B session tomorrow. But
Okay.
they're gonna wake up every day. Their job is to
Yeah,
make
no,
sure
and-
they oversee this program and help us sequence projects and make sure we've got a project plan in place. So-
Absolutely, and I'm familiar with the EPM at the airport, and they're doing a fantastic job, so I get it, and I'm supportive of having this downtown, but I'm, of course, just always gonna ask about the community piece, because that's what we get hit with, right, every day. And we should have the answers to folks. And then, like, we talked about the construction contract, they'll have their own project manager, I'm assuming, right? That contractor,
Yeah, the individual
then the-
contractors typically will have their own
PM, so
project
then-
manager, their own PMs.
so then those PMs essentially go back to the EPM?
Yes.
Okay, all right, just making sure. I think that was, how many contracts is that EPM overseeing at the airport? Do you have an idea of what that looks
I
like?
don't have an idea. You have the one with Hensel Phelps, of course, and then there's subcontractors under that. But in
And
terms
they're
of
working with the
contracts.
sub as well? The EPM is also,
Yeah, the EPM
engaging
has
with the sub?
you have an EPM relationship, then you have, like you mentioned, you have a PM relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have all the contractor parties that are part of this group.
but the EPM is communicating with all of those, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The subs,
Yeah,
everybody?
everybody. They're through Hensel Phelps and their subs, looking at the project plan, like we talked about, make sure it's scope, on time, and on budget.
Okay, thank you.
On that point, really why this role is so important, I mean, you think about the airport, we're building the terminal there, and you've got a construction manager there that is issuing, packages, we're bidding those out, we're building a terminal. In the district, we could have a lot of construction activity happening at the same time. We could have an arena going up, we could have mixed-use development, infrastructure projects, the convention center expansion, as Troy touched on. The coordination there is gonna be key, right, to manage our risk and to make sure that everything is moving according to plan. But also, they're all within, less than 1,000 feet of each other? We're all in the same space. So there should be, and we want to really work on the collaboration side, how we procure things, how we buy commodities, how we do labor. So we're going to really look to collaborate to try to create savings. But at a very minimum, we need to not create competition amongst the small group here that we're actually driving each other's costs up. So it's got to be a really coordinated, collaborative effort, and the EPM is going to help us work through that process, and it's going to be important.
All right, Committee Member Tano, this is the first round. Y'all got 5 minutes. Second round, you'll get 3. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. A couple months ago, Ben and Troy, you gave us a wonderful presentation on the procurement process and solicitation process. So I probably just need a memory jogger on that. But so for this particular one, you know, there's such an emphasis on experience and background with the 50 points. Can you jog my memory and illuminate what your vetting process is to make sure these potentials are who they say they are and have done what they say they've done? Because we've seen some of that where, oh, I've done this 10 times, and you look into it and you're like, they've never done this before. So just curious as to the vetting process. I'm sure you have a robust one, but.
We have a very robust due diligence process that the procurement team actually goes through and vets each of these respondents to make sure that what they're saying is accurate. We look at state repositories. We look at, have they ever been debarred? We look at Google searches. City Attorney's Office has resources that are available for past lawsuits. We have reference checks. We have Dun & Bradstreet to look at their financial solvency. So across the board, it's very robust, and we take all that information, and we actually provide that to the evaluation committees for their consideration as they're looking at that in tandem with the proposals.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll start the second round. Councilman White?
Yeah, just briefly, Ben mentioned the dashboard, and that was I guess, I don't know if that's in response, but we filed that CCR about an accountability dashboard, and so I'm glad you mentioned that, because we do need to make sure that the public can see, regardless who's in control. I mean, the public is going to view that the city is in control of all this, but we do need somewhere where we can see who's being hired, you know, what they're being paid, where the employees are coming from, the whole thing, because that was a big part of the conversation at the end of last year before that county vote. So I appreciate you mentioning that, and I hope that we can get this dashboard established before any of this really gets moving. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. All right. If anyone, to wrap up with item 4 and 5, I think what we're just looking for is memos in terms of regarding our questions, kind of the follow-up and how you're going to address some of the concerns and have the answers there. I think the key is in getting this out on Friday, letting people know about it, and then making sure that they put together the best plan. And I encourage I encourage the staff as they go out and they talk to them to have them look at, fortunately, Debbie does a great job of recording this all on TVSA, and Councilman White has been very consistent on what he'd like to see, and I think the council's been very consistent on terms of timeline, so that hopefully that's included in what they put forward. So thank you for that. We're going to move on to, this item is for briefing only, so we will move on to item 6. Madam Clerk, please read the caption.
Item 6 is a briefing on the release of a solicitation for one contract to provide the Capital Delivery Department with construction services for the construction of the Kenwood Community Center at 305 Dora Street for an estimated value of $6,150,000.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. Christy Chapman, Assistant Director for Capital Delivery, filling in for Mike Shannon. Today I will be presenting on item number 6 and item number 7. Item 6 is the pre-solicitation briefing on the Kenwood Community Center. The Capital Delivery Department is requesting a request for competitive seal proposals for the selection of a contractor to provide construction services for the Kenwood Community Center located in District 1. The former center was demolished in November of 2024, and the new project was funded in 2024 with certificates of obligation. Just real quickly, the project scope, it includes a new 8,800 square foot community center that will provide nutritional services, health screening services, would include free meals for seniors, computer classrooms, arts and crafts spaces, and fitness equipment. And it will also include a satellite office for the council and offices for human services and park and recreation. The estimated duration for the project is 425 days, or roughly 14 months. The estimated construction contract value is a little over $6 million. The NIGP codes used to determine the vendor availability are listed on the slide. There were 340 vendors in the city's central vendor registry system that can provide these types of construction services, and the solicitation would be advertised through the city's normal methods listed on the slide. The evaluation voting committee members include David McCary, the assistant city manager, as well as Jessica Davalina and Eric Teague with Department of Human Services, and Luis Matos, Byron Smith, and Kathleen Crabb with Capital Delivery. Submittals received will be evaluated using the project scoring criteria listed on this slide. 35 points for experience, background, qualifications, as well as the team makeup with key personnel and key subconsultants. Understanding the project and proposed management plan for 30 points, experience with San Antonio region and past performance 10 points, and pricing 15. And lastly, small business prime contract program 10 points. Continuing with the solicitation requirements, the audited financial statements are not required. The local preference program and veteran-owned small business preference programs are not applicable. It does include small business subcontracting goal of 7%. Slide 6 has the project timeline. Under the pre-solicitation phase, we have today's pre-solicitation briefing. We have the release date of January 30th. Under the solicitation phase, we have the pre-submittal conference scheduled for February 10th, under which the political contribution black art period starts February 13th. The deadline for questions is February 17th, and then we have the submittal due date on March 17th, which the solicitation is advertised for about 6 weeks. Under the post-solicitation phase, the evaluation will be complete in April of 26. The contract negotiations will be complete May of 26, and then we'll return to audit committee for the post-solicitation briefing in June of 2026. And then finally, council will consider the contract award in August of 26, and the contract start date will be September 26. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. I know District 1, we both have community centers or projects that were existing and then needed to just be redone because of age and the structure of the building. So I'm very excited for District 1 and the City of San Antonio on moving forward on this one. I think I'm glad we're going to get this out. Again, if we could just send out a reminder to council members that there will be a blackout period coming out, and that maybe like the week of February 13th that they're reminded it begins, so that, again, we are not having to see that disqualification. That's my goal for 2026. So I want to thank you for that. Is there any comment from my committee members? All right, this item was for briefing only. We'll go on to item 7. Madam Clerk, please read the caption.
Item 7 is a briefing on the release of a solicitation for one contract to provide the Capital Delivery Department with construction services for the construction of the Father Roman Senior Center at 11030 Ruidosa Street, located in Council District 3, for an estimated total value of $8,610,000.
Presenting on item number 7. So the Capital Delivery Department will also issue a request for competitive seal proposals for the selection of a contractor to provide construction services for the Father Ramon Community Center located in District 3. This project was actually demoed in March of 2025, and it was funded in FY 2025 with certificates of obligation. The project scope includes a new 12,000 square foot facility. It will include a gymnasium, classrooms for community programs, dedicated space for parks and rec, with some outdoor improvements as well, connecting the building to the adjacent basketball court, new signage, new fencing, and some minor sidewalk repairs. Like the other project, this estimated contract duration is also 425 days, which is 14 months, and the construction contract value is $8.6 million. The NIGB codes used to determine the vendor availability are listed on this slide. There were 340 vendors in the city's central vendor registry to provide these types of construction services, and we will advertise through the city's normal methods. The evaluation voting members for this project include David McCary, the Assistant City Manager, as well as Nikki Ramos, Assistant Director, and Sandy Jenkins, Project Manager from Parks and Rec, and then Richard Cotton, our Assistant Capital Programs Manager, and Alicia Gomez, Project Manager in Capital Delivery. The evaluation as listed on slide 4 and includes the 35 points for the background in the team, 30 points for the understanding the project and the proposed management plan, 10 points for experience in the San Antonio region and past performance, and price proposal 15 with small business, prime contract 10 points. Again, continuing with the solicitation requirements, the audited financial statements are not required. The local preference and veteran-owned preference are not applicable, and the Sabeta's subcontracting goals is 6%. Once again, we have the project timeline on slide 6. Today's the pre-solicitation briefing. We will release the solicitation on February 6th. Under the solicitation phase, we have the pre-submittal conference, which will be February 17th. The political contribution Black Art start date will start February 20th, followed by deadline for questions February 24th, and the due date for the submittal is March 24th, which is, again, roughly 6 weeks. Under the post-solicitation phase, the evaluation will be complete May 26, contract negotiations followed by June 26, and then we will return to audit committee for the post-solicitation in August 26. And then finally, contract award will be before council in September 26, with the contract start date also in September. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, and this is in District 3, and I appreciate the process, though it seems very long for the neighbors. Father Roman Center it sits there on the border between the county and what is the city, so we're really looking forward to this. This isn't something new. This is something we have to replace because of the building's conditions, and we had worked so hard to maintain it, but again, the climate and the drought and made it just we couldn't use the building anymore because of the soil conditions. So I'm really looking forward to finding a very good qualified contractor that's very excited about going out there in a part of San Antonio that is up and growing, and I think we'll do a really good job there, and I hope we can move faster than the timeline says, but really looking forward to it. So thank you for the presentation. Any comments from committee members? Yes.
I'll just say congrats on getting this done. I know you've done it, you've wanted it for a while. The councilwoman has worked so hard on it and been pushing, and so, these community centers are so, I think, critical. Right? It's places where people can come and gather and enjoy each other, and so I'm happy you're getting it.
Yeah, and I will admit some of the hiccups was the design phase, because there was so much that the community wanted to keep in terms of the mural and how it was going to engage, but we have such a great design and we're ready to move forward. So good job, team. Look forward to getting this project done, and we'll move on to the next item. The item is for briefing only. Buddy, this is you, item number 8. Would you brief us on the outstanding management actions for prior audits?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm Buddy Vargas, the City Auditor. I'll be covering the Management Action Plan summary. Wanted to spend some time on the background since we do have new audit committee members. We follow up on each one of our recommendations for prior audits. We included in this matrix. There are exceptions to that. It's really just depending on the significance of the observations. But going through the presentation, we start our follow-up work at the completion date, and that's the date that's given to us by the departments. It could hover around that date because we do give the departments opportunity to have enough activity to test. Sometimes when it gets to that date, there's not enough activity, so we really can't do the follow-up work. There's also a full re-audit option, again, depending on the significance of the observations. We do have 2 of those that you will not see on this table. We have the fire department fleet operations, and we have NHSD home improvement. Those you won't see here, but those are on the 26 audit plan. Just to give you the descriptions of our categories, we begin our work if management or the department is indicating that the implementation has been complete. That's when we go in there and we start our work, or again, we allow time for the activity to run. It could be on schedule, behind schedule. If it is behind schedule, it will automatically, for our categorization, will be verified pending. I do want to also add that some of these numbers change very slightly because we're doing our work daily. So like the first table, it's actually, as of today, it's 39 and 2 versus 38 and 3. The audit verification, when we go in and we review, if it's implemented as intended, it will be completed. If it's implemented with exceptions, it will be in red, and again, verification pending. There's several reasons for that. Primarily, we do allow the activity to run for a little while so we can take a representative sample. So that's usually the primary reason for the verification pending. This is how we present our results. I would just like to share that when you see a solid blue, that means next time we present this table, those will drop off. So the yellow, red are going to stay on this table until it does turn blue. Okay, but if not, this presentation would be tremendously long. I do want to touch on a few of these just to give you, highlight some examples. So for example, Public Works, I know it has a behind schedule and verification pending. That's really due to the new departments. The department split, so we have 2 departments now. They're doing some research, process improvements, so they've given us a new implementation date. Highlighting EMS because it's red. The first entry on EMS is a fee schedule, and that's going to be submitted during the budget process, so that's why that's pending. In the red, both of those items had either a documentation issue or they're still not in compliance when we went in and did the work. But again, we're going to allow that to run, and we're going to continue testing until it's resolved. I wanted to highlight P-card also. I do want to highlight the red. There are occasions where there's multiple procedures or controls that have been implemented. So just to comment on this one, number 2 and 3 have been implemented. The exception is only related to number 1. So again, that will remain as it's corrected. We can change that status. And I want to also let you know the remainder, predominantly the status, if it's in yellow, is because it's in progress. We're either letting the process run, so there's enough activity to review, or it's currently in progress. And that's all I have, unless you have any questions about the process or any of the statuses for each one of the recommendations.
Thank you, Buddy. Thank you for the update. This is one thing we approve the audit. We ask questions on the audit, and it's good to see the status as it moves forward. Does anyone from the committee have any questions want to ask specifically? All? Yes.
Buddy, quick question for you. Is any of the yellow or red tied to capacity constraints for the audit team at all in terms of manning?
Currently, no.
Okay.
Most of the yellow, again, just to reiterate, we typically allow the activity to run. So you may see yellow again on some of these. An example is the airport police is on there. It was tied to cases. If they don't have any cases during this time frame, there's nothing for us to review. And the red is actually activity that we completed, and there were exceptions. So it's not tied to resource. But there are times where you'll see some dates that we may not have gotten to yet. That does occur, but it's not a resource limitation at this point.
Good copy, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. That was a really good question. I think, Ben, as we move forward and we look at, of course, it's always going to come to ITSD and then how we deal with that whole kind of exit process for employees that move or leave, because I think that's the one thing that has been consistent throughout is that when it comes down to it is people still had access. People still had access. So if we look at the yellow and the red and see if any of that is a trend where we need to do that, or if it's just departmental, we can look at addressing that. The other thing is manpower, because as we talk about budget and what departments need, what sort of staffing to get this done. Fortunately, I feel like a lot of this is procedural, and our departments have addressed that. But if it does come down to manpower because they do not have the correct staff, we do need to look at that this upcoming budget. All right. If there isn't anything else, the time is now 11:15, and the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.